advance very slowly, and perhaps the operation would be beyond the person's ability to stand it. Do you operate or not? I mean, there are decisions like that that have to be made in many areas, and the decisions are not going to be made absolutely correctly every time. That's the way life is. That's the best I can give, I'm afraid, to answer. Uh-huh. uh, don't forget, it's a famous remote viewer who gave us the Hale-Bopp comet object and helped convince a lot of people in San Diego to take their own lives. I must say that when it comes to remote viewing, I have many doubts as to its efficacy. The Hale-Bopp object being a major case in point, something that practically panicked large numbers of people and was in fact not even there. So I have first of all, a completely false image, an idea, that it's a false science. I don't, things may happen from time to time, as they do in psychic circles, sort of by accident, or, but the idea that it can be as calibrated as some people claim, I have a great deal of doubt about. But in terms of this case, the point is that there's not only not a motive for the government to do this, there's not the capability of the government doing it. I think that I'd like to make a point here, and this is by way of an analogy. I had a couple of otherwise sensible people say to me, but I think that the case is a setup by the government to discredit you. And that everybody in it has been brainwashed or hypnotized to something by the government, and they're all lying, and every single one of the witnesses and everything else, because they don't even know it. It's all been a government plot to discredit you. Well, I wanted to make the analogy here. Supposing you took something like the Kennedy assassination, and supposing there is a government role in the Kennedy assassination, and some investigator, this is by analogy myself, but some investigator into the Kennedy assassination is getting very close to the truth. So the government decides to discredit him. And what they do is they have one person after another come forward, very credible people, saying, as a matter of fact, I haven't been able to talk about it, now I can. I was at the grassy knoll, I saw two men firing, blah, blah, blah. And everybody comes up with very logical things, makes a terrific case. And this investigator publishes a book on it. And this is the government's plot to discredit him. He publishes a book on it, and the book is very persuasive. And then all of a sudden, every one of these witnesses said, we made it up, it didn't happen. It's just a trick. We made it up. It never happened. There was no, we lied. What would the public think? Would the public then say this investigator is discredited, or what's going on here? Why did all these people come forward and then recant? Who made them recant it? Is the government forcing these people to deny their experiences and so forth? And what, of course, would have happened is that the government would have shot itself in the other foot now, having created some kind of scenario, made it very believable, and then tried to pretend it wasn't believable, it was a trick. There's no possibility for the government to discredit any investigator in UFO field by that method. If the government wants to discredit me or anybody else, it would be very simple. They would plant some cocaine in the glove compartment of my car, or have a 13-year-old girl insist I had her in a hotel room, or something like this that would discredit me personally. But you would never try to do that. The government would never try to do that by building up a very powerful case and then trying to pretend that the case wasn't true. If you see what I mean. So anyway, the chances of any case, forget about the Linda Cortile case, talk about Travis Walton, Betty Hill, Roswell, anything. The idea that any of these cases was run by the government to somehow discredit investigators or discredit the UFO phenomenon just doesn't make any sense. It's counterproductive. Okay, that's a very good question, and that's been mentioned a number of times. It actually has been tried. Um, the situation is, first of all, it's a complicated one because you have to get somebody willing to have a videotape going all night long in the bedroom. And this is night after night after night after night. I mean, we're talking, let's say, 2 years of this. Then, of course, somebody has to review the tape to make sure that there's something on it. You've got 8 hours of tape, say, and you've got to review it, and you've got to have the person willing to do it. We have had people willing to do it on short periods of time, but the problem is, and incidentally, I have to say there's work being done in just this area that you're suggesting, which is some trying by some mechanical means to detect these events when they happen. There is a developing area of technology here, which I can't go into, because we don't want anything in the alien's knowledge as much as we can possibly prevent it. But attempts are being made. But let me tell you a very interesting case, which involved a subject David Jenkins was working with. This woman had been having fairly frequent experiences. Now, that could be every couple of months or whatever. She had a video camera there, and they had it on half speed so they could get an 8-hour tape. And what happened was, this particular night, she felt very sure something was going to happen. And very often, those feelings seem to be validated. Something does happen, and in fact, does take place. So Dave Jacobs gave her the instruction to set up the video camera at the bed. Now, she had 2 very young children, and her husband was away, so she was frightened that she wanted to have the children sleep with her, which she did. She also, according to a suggestion they made, she got a piece of clothesline. She tied the clothesline to the bedpost and tied the other piece of clothesline around her left wrist. Then she finally went to sleep with the children. She's very tired, but very wary. But when she finally went to sleep, she remembers sleeping right straight through the night. And she woke up, and when she woke up, she realized that the thing was no longer attached to her wrist. She had no memory of what time, and she tied a couple of knots. Then she checked the video camera, and it was still running. Even though they had been asleep roughly 8 hours, there was still an hour and a half of blank tape. So she reviewed the tape, and this is what the tape showed. It showed her sitting up in bed, glassy-eyed, untying the cord from her wrist, and then picking up one of her children and carrying the children, of course, off of the camera range, out of sight, and probably some other room. Coming back, getting the other child and carrying that child out of the room, too. So now the camera is showing an empty bed, and then, boom, they're all 3 back in bed again. But the camera did not show them walking back into the room. It was as if, at some point, apparently she was compelled to sit up, untie herself, remove the children from the bed, and the camera was somehow then mechanically, actually she did it, but that would have shown up on the screen, on the tape. But the machine was, the tape recorder was turned off, video camera. And then once she and the children had been returned to bed, and probably after an abduction, then somehow the camera was switched back on. So the first scene you see is already back in bed, which is, of course, a physical impossibility if the tape is running continuously and there are only 3 people in the house. And it's almost as if the aliens seem to understand the circumstances and worked around it. Now, as I say, there is a technology being developed, which along different lines, which we hope will give us some very distinct evidence. But what you brought up as a question is a very important one, and I thank you. Any other questions? Well, that's a good point. And of course, it's always been a problem to know, have things changed, or are we just learning about things that have been going on all along anyway, and we just hadn't noticed. And I think that, of course, that's a very big issue that we have only slowly begun to put the pieces together. For instance, I had been looking into the abduction phenomenon for about 7 years before I faced the idea that there was a reproductive aspect to it, even though the evidence was there all along. And when I wrote Intruders and brought up the whole issue of the reproductive, the hybrid program, suddenly everybody in the field realized, I run into things like that too, but just everybody sort of didn't want to deal with it. And of course, once you begin to make inquiries, when you do interviews with people, and you find out that in fact there were some disappearing pregnancies, et cetera, it is as if something new has happened in abductions is that we found out about something that's very old in abductions that we never noticed before. So that's always been the problem. Are we seeing something really new? Now, the things that I wrote about in Intruders, which were new, I also think are really old. I mean, they were new to the research community. The first was the issue of what I call alien co-option, where abductees find themselves in a ship operating as if they are one with the aliens, even wearing a kind of a blue uniform, and obviously intimidating or soothing human abductees who think that these are just normal human beings. I think very often some abductees are seen in military uniforms working with the aliens, which does a very interesting thing. It of course, makes the abductee feel that there's no way we can even trust our own human beings around us. It's a very subversive kind of a thing, I think, to realize when you see a human being of either the alien blue uniform or a military uniform operating with the aliens. Your whole sense of who you can trust is shattered further. So it's a terrible psychological effect. But I think that's been going on a long, long time, and I ran into a number of cases of that that I finally put together in Witness. But the alien co-option is one. Another was, of course, this very important fact that people have been brought together, and I don't think it's typical, but it does happen. The Mickey and Baby Ann circumstance, which I dealt with at length in the book, and in many other cases where people are abducted in childhood, and they're simply put together as little children, and the aliens watch them play and relate and see how human beings form relationships, which eventually, over the years, become love relationships or sexual relationships. So this whole thing of watching is kind of long-term study, the way human beings form friendships and love relationships. And then, of course, what happens in sometimes very tragic ways is that when these human beings meet each other in adulthood, in the real world, by accident perhaps, or perhaps by deliberate arrangement by the aliens, who knows, when they meet, they realize that they know each other and in the sense of love one another, and yet each one might be involved in a new relation, in a marriage, a relationship, or whatnot, and this can play havoc with people's lives. But the Mickey and Baby Ann aspect to abductions is something that obviously has been going on a long, long time. In the case of the Linda Cortula case, that whole process would have begun well over 40 years ago. So the fact that I only discovered it 3 or 4 years ago, whatever, it was new to me, but it was not new to the abduction phenomenon. So I don't know that I see a lot of new aspects to it, but obviously the better we are at doing investigation and the more open people are about what actually happened to them, the more aspects of this we're going to learn. I think the one thing that seems to be new and disturbing is the fact that it seems to be accelerating, that there are more and more cases that the aliens seem to be a little frantic and therefore more mistakes seem to be made, and it's as if they have some kind of deadline or some kind of issue that they have to meet. But I don't see that the quality or type of abduction is really changing very much. The one thing, of course, I should also say is that the role of hybrids in the abduction scenario, that seems to be increasing. And that is an exception to what I was saying. We've seen many more cases where some of the abductors seem to be partially human. And this is something that David tends to in this book.
We have another question. What about the instance of different types of you could talk about the race, the incidents involving Nordic or alien types?
Yeah. Well, Dave, first of all, the Nordic situation, I really essentially think is a hybrid situation. I don't think that there is something that's an alien species that came here from elsewhere that is very, very human, even though it has funny eyes. I think that what we used to talk about Men in Black and Nordics and sometimes strange-looking people that seem to belong to the Army or the Air Force or something like that, I think in most all these cases these are manifestations of the hybrid phenomenon. And when we get, I've said earlier, for years, that maybe 85% of the descriptions we get of UFO occupants are essentially the small gray figure with the big eyes and so on. We have had many cases of a taller, more insect-like figure, which is often seen as sort of the ruler of things in the ship, the so-called praying mantis type, which is more insect-like. And I always remember Carla Turner saying that her first conscious abduction experience, she remembered being outside when she was something like 5 years old, and she said, here was this tall, like 7-foot praying mantis-like thing, and she said it was trying to tell me it was my mother. of course, one of the basic techniques that the aliens use to make you calmer and make you wonder where you came from and who you belong to and so on, is to keep insisting that they're your parents. But anyway, so we had the hybrids of all sorts, all types, the praying mantis types and the gray figures. There are some reports of the more reptilian types, although that's extremely rare in my experience. But the most important thing to remember is that all of these figures seem to be reported in the same ships, doing the same thing together cooperatively. In other words, you have one group doing one sort of thing, and one group is just really interested in atomic bombs, and others interested in whatever. They all seem to have a shared interest, and at the center of that interest is us. Any other questions? I can't hear anything. Okay. Yeah. Well, the thing always to remember is that with the screen memory issue, which I stumbled across in the Barbara Horton case about the deer in the woods that turned out not to be a deer. I think that this is more a mental phenomenon, a way in which they can see something in a different guise. I've had all sorts of animal things, people describing that these two white cats came in the room, for instance, and the white cat floated her out of her bed and so forth. And I said, well, tell me about these cats. Were they long-haired cats or short-haired cats? She said, oh, they didn't have any hair. Bald cats, in other words. But people can be made to see animals, see aliens in various guises. Somebody has printed, I think it was Patrick Cleage, did a little book of images of various alien types that people have reported, and I told him that it was the biggest collection of screen memories that one could possibly imagine. We have there was a woman who recently, through a friend, she's not somebody I've worked with directly, but she definitely had these experiences. But she said that she was driving out in the country, and this cow came up and looked in the window of the car and stared at her, and it ran alongside the car with her, and she was going 45 miles an hour. And the cow was staying with the car for 10 or 15 minutes. And we decided it was a thoroughbred cow. But the point is that well, I'll tell you another one of these mental images. A man who I worked with, who I have every confidence in, was in a craft, and he sees cooperating with the aliens is a soldier with an MP, military police armband, and a regular army uniform. And he's thinking, with a name tag and everything, and he's thinking, why would they're cooperating with the aliens, why would they have a name tag and a uniform, and why would they conceal themselves in some way, And as he's looking at the man and thinking that, and he's thinking, I don't think that's really an MP. And at that point, the figure changes, and he's now wearing a Nazi uniform with a swastika armband. As if the aliens could use whatever image this man had probably stocked in his memory to try to create a certain kind of image. And that's one of the problems we have with some of these other alien types. But I have to say now that at this point, I'm going to have to bid everybody adieu. I have an appointment that I must go to. And so I have enjoyed this very, very much, and I hope you have. And I will be speaking down at the Gulf Breed Conference coming up in March. I don't know whether any of you will be able to make that. It looks like it will be a very interesting conference. But at this point, I'm just going to have to say good afternoon, and thank you very much. Okay, thank you. Bye-bye.